Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Beauty of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Hayley Simpson. And in this episode, I really want to share my story with you. So, before I was diagnosed with celiac disease, I was very poorly. So, let's rewind. I'm 42. I was diagnosed when I was 32, so 10 years ago. I started having symptoms around the age of 22, which I now know from my diagnosis that I went on holiday a couple of times in that year to Egypt with my boyfriend, just a really cheap deal. And both of us got stomach bugs both times when we were there. And the specialist believes that that's what triggered my celiac disease. So from that point, I do remember I was very poorly with that stomach bug, sickness and stomach bug. Um, Kind of got over that when I got home, started to feel a lot better, didn't really think much of it. And then symptoms started very similar to IBS. So for a very long time, I was told I had IBS. So, how to manage IBS, less stress, blah, blah, blah. So I kind of went along with that for a while, tried to change my diet, and it was very hard because I was working in quite a demanding, stressful job, working long hours. So it was very difficult to get plenty of sleep and not be stressed. I was working in events as well, so you don't really have time to plan food. So I was grabbing biscuits and not being the most healthiest anyway. So what actually happened with my symptoms, they actually got so bad. They got worse and worse and worse. And I was anemic as well. And I was told that, my iron was really low, my folic acid was really low, my B12 was really low. So I was put on some medication. So started taking those. Sometimes they would help, sometimes not. I remember coming home from work and just falling asleep. Um, I had really, really bad mouth ulcers. I had so many mouth ulcers all the time. If they went, then one would come back. And let me tell you, I have none. I don't have any mouth ulcers now. So if you do suffer with mouth ulcers and people say, oh, you're run down, and it really isn't that. And there is a way to heal them. The other symptoms I had were really bad diarrhea, really bad stomach ache, bloating, just really uncomfortable most of the time. And obviously, I'm in my early 20s here, so it's a little bit embarrassing at times, um, frustrating, not understanding why, I was feeling this way. And I remember quite a few occasions I'd go for lunch with the girls, you maybe grab a sandwich, and I was just running to the toilet like straight after with just like upset stomach, feeling a bit queasy, cold sweats, and was just like, this is so weird. Kept going back to the doctors. I was in this mindset of hoping a doctor would give me an answer. And they did test for celiac disease over those 10 years. They tested about 5 times with a blood test, and all of those blood tests came back negative. So I finally managed to see a doctor who seemed to understand a little bit more about gut issues, and he recommended for me to try a low FODMAPs diet, which is cutting out certain food groups and seeing how you get on. And by this point, I'd already cut out dairy because I thought maybe it was that. I had started to cut out gluten anyway. Part of the FODMAPs diet is no gluten. So I started to cut out bread and pasta, and I was very conscious of checking, what had gluten in. My symptoms just didn't get better. I was absolutely exhausted. Everything was so difficult. And when, for me, I was in a very demanding job. I used to get ill an awful lot. I would get colds, I would get tonsillitis, always had like upper respiratory kind of illnesses. and sore throats and headaches and migraines. All of these things were just like everyday life to me. And I was always into my fitness, always wanted to be in the gym and keep healthy. And what I noticed was that if I was training with my trainer and I was being quite regular, I'd then get ill. I'd be able to do a couple of weeks of my program and then be really poorly. And I remember speaking to the doctor about it at the time, and he said, "Well, you're just unlucky. You're just unlucky. You're just getting colds and you shouldn't train so hard." And I'm thinking, well, I'm in my early 20s here. I think I was probably 25, 26. And I'm like, this isn't right. I've always been in the gym from like the age of like 13. I used to go to aerobics. I was always exercising. So that was just really upsetting and strange. I didn't really understand it. And the other things that I really noticed was not only just feeling fatigue and run down and the bloating, it was kind of the brain fog, and you just can't concentrate. And I was getting quite forgetful, which is quite difficult when you're trying to focus on your career and your life is busy. So anyway, I feel like this went on for a long time, and I know 10 years sounds like a lot. It is a long time, and I really, really wish that I had understood how my body works, how our bodies get nutrients from our foods, what our foods do to fuel our bodies. I knew enough. I was training, I had a trainer, I had a food meal plan. So I kind of knew enough, but not enough to be healthy like I am now. So what actually happened was, with my trainer, she had given me some meal plan, and I was eating porridge every morning, and I was so ill. And one of my colleagues was in the toilet with me another morning where I was just like, I feel so sick. I felt like I was going to be sick. And she's like, "You look grey. Like, this isn't normal, Hayley. You shouldn't feel like this just because you've eaten some porridge for breakfast." So again, another trip to the doctors, and I finally managed to kind of just find a doctor that actually did really kind of empathize, and was like, okay, let's look into it. So again, he did another blood test, and did me um, kind of pointed me in directions of things to research and just to kind of look into the FODMAPs a bit more. Anyway, so to cut a very long story short, it got to the point where I was hardly unable to walk sometimes. Sometimes I would need to sit down. The fatigue was crippling. It was so bad. And I went to Portugal on holiday, and I remember we had booked an Airbnb, and it was on like this really steep hill. And this whole holiday, I was loving being in Portugal. And every morning we had these most gorgeous croissants. And obviously now I know they were just making me so ill. And those days, I remember I passed out. I couldn't walk up this hill. I had to keep sitting on the floor. Like, I was just like not in a good way and just exhausted. And I remember I came home from that holiday, and I was just like, something's got to change. Like, this isn't right. And still kind of like cutting out gluten, but sometimes not. One day I ate a pizza, and I just remember, after eating that food, I woke up about 2 hours later on my sofa with the biggest migraine, feeling absolutely awful. So I went to back to the GP, and I explained to him what had happened. And if I'm honest, he was quite sarcastic. He was like, "Oh, well, you must have been ill if you couldn't go shopping whilst you was in Portugal." And anyway, I finally got a referral to a specialist, and that was the beginning of my journey to wellness. Because as soon as I saw this specialist, he said to me, "You're too young to be anemic." And I said, "I've been anemic my whole adult life." So I was really shocked, and I went in for a day procedure, and they put cameras down your throat, and they put cameras um, in your anus so that they can look at your bowels. They can look. They wanted to know what was going on with my stomach as well. So they did all these tests, took biopsies. Um, and the funny thing was, actually, I woke up. So I was sedated, but I came round when the doctor was at the other end, let's say. Oh my God, it was so painful. I just remember waking up being like, ow, ow, ow. And then they must have knocked me back out. And then when I came round and I went to see the surgeon, he was like, do you remember much? And I was like, yeah, I remember waking up. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry about that. And we had a little giggle. But he was like, yeah, pretty sure you've got celiac disease. And the relief was like, oh, okay. So, I'd been told the blood test didn't come back. And he said, sometimes that's the case. And where I had cut gluten out quite a lot, not completely, um, in the run up to my after the pizza incident, that was the turning point. I stopped eating gluten, and I was checking things, but there are a lot of things that gluten's in that we don't realize, like sauces and certain crisps and things. And so I'm not sure I was cutting out 100%. But when I went for my biopsy, before I had that procedure, they had asked me to eat gluten in the run up to that. And I just refused. I was like, I can't do my day to day activities if I reintroduce gluten. I wasn't willing to do it. And anyway, so they still got the diagnosis and could still see that it was damaging my gut. So yeah, so that was my turning point, and that was around 2013. I got that diagnosis, and they offered to put me in touch with a nutritionist. So that was the next step. So I saw a nutritionist, and she advised me a couple of things, talked about the condition, and just said to me, look, the most tiniest crumb will make you ill. And she talked to me about cross contact and how, you know, best to kind of lead my lifestyle. She told me to drink this orange squash because it had extra calcium in it, and that as a celiac, I may not be able to absorb much calcium, and that I would need a dentistry. I can't say that word, a bone scan, which just checks how your bones are and how strong they are. So, since my diagnosis, I've only had one bone scan. And I didn't see that nutritionist again. It wasn't really offered. Um, and so off I went, kind of researching and just sort of trying to learn about this condition. And it did take a long time. And I will come back on my next podcast and I'll talk to you about my healing journey. This episode, I really wanted to focus on the fact that it took me 10 years to get a diagnosis, and I take full responsibility for not pushing and not researching and understanding my body. And if there's one thing I could say to people, it's that um, look after your body, understand how it works. Don't waste years and years and years thinking things are normal. Sometimes we do have reactions to food. So after I was diagnosed, I saw a specialist. I paid private to go and see a lady who I had colon cleanses with her. She did intolerance testing for me as well. And it turned out the things that were also irritating me, I was intolerant to. So eggs, a lot of dairy like milk, cream, things like that were I couldn't have. Almonds, like lots of the little things that I kind of knew, onions, mushrooms, garlic, all these things really affected me, lentils. So, what I would advise is keep a food diary. Understand what upsets your stomach, see how things make you feel. And then once you've done that, you can go to your GP with that as well for your referral. I just wished I had pushed harder because I accepted the fact that someone was telling me I had IBS, but I just knew myself that things weren't right. And, if you are experiencing diarrhea or constipation or bloating or mouth ulcers, everybody has different symptoms with celiac disease. So I'm not saying it is celiac disease if you're feeling these symptoms, because you could just have an intolerance or an allergy. Um, but it could be celiac disease. And believe me, I feel so well now. And I just don't want anybody to suffer how I suffered. So, the best years of my life, really, my 20s, my early 30s, and I was poorly for a lot of it, and trying to figure out what was going on with me. So I will end this episode by saying thank you so much for listening. And if you're not sure, reach out, ask a professional, go to your doctors, keep a food diary of your symptoms, what you eat, how you feel after you eat that, what you think might be triggering it, and just see if there's any patterns. And as always, I'm here if you want to ask me any questions. I'm no expert. I just live with the condition, and I'm so well now that I just want to share my wisdom and my knowledge and what I've learned. So yeah, I hope you find some comfort in my story. If you're experiencing the same, please don't waste time. Please, 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 speak to a doctor, get a referral, and just find out how best to look after yourself. So, yes, thank you so much for being here. So, from my heart to yours, I really appreciate you, and I hope you found this useful. Lots of love. Take care, and I'll see you in the next episode.